He won't talk to you about the things you can possess. He will talk to you about where you are standing. And so in Psalm 65 from verse 4, here's what the Bible said. It said, blessed is the man whom God causes to approach him. Because the man who approaches God begins to wield every authority that God has in his possession. He said, blessed is the man whom God causes, whom God chooses, and whom God causes to approach him, whose delight is in tarrying in the courts of God. Because that man becomes an agent of authority. The things others are pursuing after, they are the things he just commands and they happen. If you go to Psalm 80 verse 18 again, he now began to make a statement. He said, quicken us, O Lord, that we may call upon you. So in case we are not hearing your beckoning, why don't you energize us to call upon you? Because our greatest ambition is to stand with you. Our greatest ambition is to walk with you. Because we know when we possess you, every other thing becomes a byproduct. And so he identified first that it's a blessing to approach God. And then he also went further to say, somewhere, somehow, we don't have the tendencies of choosing you. There are so many other things that distract us. We want to watch the World Cup finals and we prepare for it for 1 week. We are excited about it. But when it has to do with the courts of heaven, somewhere, somehow, even though we know that the oracles of God dwell there, our appetites and our proclivities and tendencies are not designed to come there. So since we are not wise enough to desire you, quicken us, O Lord, that we may call upon your name. The reason is simple. When we come to where you are, everything will meet us there. But when we chase things, we become frustrated and we become stranded because we will never get them. And so the place where all things converge is in the presence of God. And so the psalmist knows walking with God becomes the greatest asset in life. And what God gave to us as a free ticket is the right to come there. And so when we are talking about prayer, we are not talking about asking God and receiving something from God. We are actually talking about the liberty to walk with God. Whoever calls upon him, he says he will answer. If you can call, God will be there for you. But the reason many are not calling is because they've not seen the blessedness of the presence of God. When the psalmist was speaking, he said, a day in the courts of God is better than 1,000 years elsewhere. What does he know? What did he encounter and what has happened to him? That on the strength of time and chronology, he will refer to one day in God's presence as greater than 1,000 years elsewhere. Is it possible that your existence without a relationship with God is already a waste? Because how many people will live for 1,000 years? If somebody who knows God's presence is saying a day in God's presence is greater than 1,000 years, and you have lived for 80 years, you say you are old. And somebody else who has entered reality is telling you that there is a realm where a moment is superior to a lifetime. That realm is in God's presence. And in prayer, you have the ticket of living in that realm. And so when Paul came, he said, don't pray for 3 hours. Don't pray in the morning. Don't pray in the evening. He said, pray without ceasing. Dwell there. That means if you dwell there, 10 days of your life will be equivalent to what? 10,000 years. 1 year of your life will be equivalent to 360,000 years. So if you are now alive for 30 years, how old are you in real sense? So when they ask you for your date of birth, you will look at them and smile. You will say, you won't believe when I tell you. Do you see why certain men become ancient? When they talk, you know they are digging something from a realm that is deeper than time. Because according to the divine equation, a day in God's presence is greater than 1,000 years. And you have lived in God's presence for 30 years. So how old are you? So when men now weigh you and they are saying, how can this boy be 22 years and he's making impact? You tell them, I am not 22. You are judging from the wrong plane. Where I go to, 1 day is 1,000 years. That is why I can be 19 and I'll be affecting the globe. Because I go to places where spirits that are older than time dwell. They were there when time was created. They were the ones who fabricated the time. It's called the benefit of prayer. So when you come to sing, the words you articulate together, people hear them and they say, where did you get it from? I came from where words were created. I'm not talking what I read in a book. I came from, there are scrolls somewhere where time doesn't exist. And if you want to become old, come with me. You will age in the natural realm, but in the spirit you become ancient. And so the greatest benefit of prayer is intimacy. When you become intimate with God, you go to where reality begins from. And so your life becomes a wonder to your generation. The reason many are not praying is because they are interacting with other things. Thank God for the books you read about Albert Einstein. They are beautiful. That is called Fellowship with Albert Einstein. Thank God for the books you read from the wise men of the world. They are beneficial. But there are certain things that are deeper than men can articulate. When you come to where men interact with God, you see things that sometimes only you can know them. Because there is a specificity about ordination. And so there is something God will whisper. 5 of us will hear, but we'll hear different things. And so when we come out, one may become a billionaire. Because what he heard empowered him to make wealth. Another will hear something and he'll become a miracle worker. All of us thought we heard the same thing. But because we are coming to where knowledge dwells, when he says one thing, it can mean 1,000 things. And so the true advantage of the believer is his ability through prayer to walk with God. And so when we start engaging the altar of prayer, our goal is not the lingo. Our goal is not the time. Our goal is the depth. Where have I journeyed to in God? Paul said, I know a man many years ago, whether he was in the flesh or in the spirit, I can't tell. He said, but that man was carried to the third heaven. And when Paul came back, he said he went even to Hades, and the things he heard were unlawful to be uttered among men. So how can a man know something that men are not permitted to know? Who is he? It is called the mysteries of intimacy. And when you enter that depth with God, you become a joy of many generations. The things you say, generations after you, we utter them. They will never be satisfied. The reason is because you have walked with a spirit that is ancient. So the first benefit of prayer is the fact that prayer opens the doorway to intimacy. A man who doesn't know prayer will not have intimacy with God. And if he doesn't have intimacy with God, the true advantages that are made for his destiny, he will never realize them. He will think he's making progress until they show him his reality from Zion. Somebody may be making 1 million a month, 10 million a month, 20 million a month, and he said, I am doing well. And then they look at you from Zion, they say, you've never come here. How come? How come we've never seen you? If we don't see you and you don't come here, how can you now attach purpose to the money you have? The money you have will now become the basis of your condemnation. Because when you go to where they whisper to the souls of men, they will tell you, it is not about the money, it's about the purpose of that money. And you can never have an understanding of that purpose with your brain. It will be shown to you. And so the first true benefit of prayer is that in prayer, men are invited to walk with God. This is why the patriarchs of old exalted prayer, because they knew that outside of God, they were nothing. And because they now know God forever and ever, their names will never be forgotten. Do you think you call your child David because you love the name David? No, you don't love David. That name has no meaning to you. It is because of who bore it and who he became in God. And so when you call your son David, you are actually reminiscing on the immortality of a man who has walked with the Spirit. So men become eternally relevant because they walk with the Spirit. This is a man who wandered around with women, but suddenly he saw a spirit and he started walking with that spirit. And forever and ever, generations to come will be honored to name themselves after his order, because he has seen something that is eternal. Abraham was in the hall of the Chaldees until he encountered that spirit. And when he met that spirit, forever and ever, you and I became the children of Abraham. The question is, when you leave, what will you be remembered for? There's no house you build that will last for more than 60 years. The world is moving too fast for your house to be relevant for 60 years. There's no car you buy that will be relevant for more than 10 years. There's no money you have in any account that can exist beyond 2 generations. And so the question is, when you leave, what will you find about you? The only thing that can live with about you forever are the immortal things you picked from the presence of God. Because everybody who goes there carries something. Some goes there, they carry favor. Some go there, they carry wisdom. Some go there, they carry power. And so the things they establish because they went to the immortal realms, they become immortal forever on the face of the earth. And so a man who has not journeyed in intimacy with God, he's already forgotten. He's just using money to sustain his influence. Some people are struggling so hard to be relevant while they are yet alive. Some men have died and they cannot be forgotten. because of where they went to and the things they taught. Did you not read about Elijah? Elijah had to be invited to the earth 4 times. God said, no, you have known the glory too much for us to let you go. So you will not die. We will preserve you for another generation. And even after he died, they said the spirit of Elijah came back. And after the spirit of Elijah came back, the 2 witnesses will still come back. A man becomes immortal like God because he has walked too close with God for a world to forget him. Intimacy is what provides for you the benefits of immortality. No matter the money you have, no matter the position you occupy, you will be forgotten unless you touch something that comes from the spirit that is eternal. And so the first benefit of prayer is intimacy. Men of old were wise. They gave their all to prayer. Daniel was in Babylon. The king said nobody should pray to any other god. He was willing to risk his position and to risk his freedom for prayer, because outside of intimacy he has no freedom in the first place. And in Daniel 6:10 the Bible said 3 times. So if you are praying 3 times when they gave a law that nobody should pray, how many times do you pray when there's no law? And he said 3 times the guy prayed facing Jerusalem. He was not afraid to be arrested. And when they arrested him, he didn't apologize. I'd rather be nothing outside of prayer. I'd rather be nothing with prayer than to be everything outside of prayer. Because with prayer, I have God. Outside of prayer, I have nothing. These men knew these things and they were willing to give their lives for it. And so the first benefit of prayer is a walk with God. And the reason is simple. Your walk with God makes you immortal. Every other thing you touch will ebb away with time. But the things you pick from the realm of God, they will outlive you. The second benefit of prayer is transformation. The Bible says we all with open faces, beholding as in a glass the image of the Lord, we are changed. We are changed. There is something on your inside that yourself don't know about yourself. The greatest deception a man suffers is when he thinks he knows himself. The Bible said he has put eternity in our hearts. As we are sitting here now, we are all carriers of eternity. And you now look at yourself in a mirror and you look at a paper you got from Harvard and you say, this is who I am. You don't know who you are. There are things on your inside that you will never know. Some persons will discover who they really